Hi there, Nancy Muller here with another conversation on Life is All About Choices. And today my guest is Kim, and I know I say this every week to you, but I'm really excited that she's here, and I'm really excited to share her with you. So before we go any farther, Kim, please tell us who you are, what you do, and why you're so fabulous.
Hi, Nancy. Thanks for having me. Um, who am I? So I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in California. What I do is I run an agency that provides trauma-informed care to victims of crime. And so we provide easy access to women and children who've experienced some kind of trauma. And then what makes me fabulous is that I'm very passionate about what I do, and my goal and my vision is to make it so that women and children are not confined or defined by their trauma.
I love that. And I know that that was one of the things that really, spoke to my heart about you. And I just feel like the universe has brought us together, and we're going to be friends for life. So thank you.
Good. I'm looking forward to it, our ongoing friendship.
Exactly. I'm so excited about this. So, Kim, anyone who's watched these conversations knows that usually guests who are on the show have been through some type of a traumatic event that maybe some people would have just climbed into a hole and, said, I'm not coming out of this ever. And I think that yours is one that's very powerful. Would you mind sharing a little bit about the hole? I call it a hole because, we can climb out of holes.
Yes.
Yeah. So the hole that you found yourself in, and I know it's part of what makes you so fabulous today, but share that.
Yeah. Where should I start? So when I was, years ago, I was dating a wonderful man. And at the time, we were very active in our lives. We belonged to this club called Four Seasons. And the cool thing about the club was that it really had activities that went for each different season. So in the winter, of course, we skied, right? In the summer, we used to go sailing. In the spring, we do hiking. So lots of different activities throughout the entire year. And on one particular driving trip, my boyfriend at the time and I were driving, and he said, he was going to go to the doctor because he had a lump on his neck. And I was like, oh, I wonder what that is. I looked at him and I was like, well, when was the last time you've been to the doctor? And he kind of had this reaction that I found kind of typical in men that in my life. And that was like, I only go if there's like a big issue. Like
if something's hanging off.
Yeah. Like my arm is broke, but I was able to put a cast on it myself. That's no reason to go. But if it's actually hanging, I'll go.
Exactly.
And so, of course, that sparks a little bit of anxiety or worry, because I'm like, you're actually going to the doctor? Like, turns out that he was diagnosed with a type of leukemia. And they had given him a prognosis of 10 years. And at the time, he was 35. And so we continue our life, and he decides that he really wants to live life to the fullest. He doesn't want anyone to know, because he didn't want to have that look that people give you when you're sick. He didn't want people to be asking him, how do you feel, with that sound. And he used to imitate it, like, how do you feel? Like with that extra drama. And that was his thing. It's just between you and me. He shared it with his mother and his brother, and that was like it. So fast forward, he's doing pretty well, going in and out of kind of highs and lows. It was years before he needed actual transfusions and chemotherapy. And along that time, we decided we were going to stay together. We were connected. And along that time, they told him he was infertile. And I'm approaching, my 40s. And so we didn't worry about that. And we didn't have plans to have children. So lo and behold, one day I end up feeling kind of funny, and I said, oh, I'm pregnant. So we're excited, we're pregnant. And we decided we're going to get married. And so I have the baby. We're worried, of course, because with his, history of having so much chemicals going through his body and his leukemia, et cetera. And then my age, we were like, we're not sure if we're going to be able to produce a healthy child. But we were able to, a beautiful baby girl, and life was going good. At the time, I'm working in nonprofit mental health. I am an outpatient director of agency that provides therapy to severely emotionally disturbed children in LA area. And he works for the county. And so we have good jobs, you know, things are going together. We're talking about connecting and moving in and building a life and a home. And right around the time my daughter's 6 months old, he starts to need more treatment and longer doses, et cetera. He's starting to get more and more sick. And because he never planned on having a family, he didn't look at the option of, what's that called? Bone marrow transplant?
Oh, yeah.
So that wasn't of interest at the time. But now that he has a potential wife and a child, he's like, ooh. So he started that process of trying to find a donor. I'd been on the registry for, excuse me, I don't know, by that time, probably 10 years. And obviously I wasn't a match because they didn't call me. So then she's 6 months old. Then she's somewhere around 7 or so months. We decided to go. We just eloped. We ran to Vegas, got married, didn't tell nobody. Came back and we're like, hey, we're married. So that was exciting. And then he started getting sick. So he had pneumonia and he couldn't shake the pneumonia. So in the end, at the time when I was newlywed with a 10-month-old baby girl, he dies. And it was just like life-shattering,
Sure.
sad, angry, despair, frustrated, all of those kind of like heavy feelings. Mm-hmm. And trying to figure out like, what am I going to do next? Like, how do I go from here? I have a newborn. I'm traveling about an hour commute to and from work. Like, how do I keep that up? And I ended up quitting my job. I quit my job that following 3 or 4 months later, right after my daughter turned a year old. And that, I would say, not the best decision, because I quit my job because I decided I wanted to be a life coach and, work from home and provide, the kinds of therapeutic support to trauma, because that's where my expertise is: anxiety, depression, trauma. I was going to coach women how to, fix their lives. And I think at the time I left, I had one client. And I didn't realize it was such a struggle. And so from there, I transitioned and did a lot of things in between, bridge jobs, connector jobs, contract jobs, in order to kind of make ends meet, because I really wanted to be like internally, I wanted to still be, I guess, have some kind of important kind of stamp in society and be like, productive. I wanted to still be a good mom, although my friend told me, that first year after he dies, you probably won't be that good of a mom. You probably won't be able to access your emotions the way you think. You probably have highs and lows. And boy, was she right.
One of the things that I resonated with in your story is how you said that you would drive to work or home from work and you'd be crying and screaming and yelling at the universe, like, why me? Why did this happen? But then as soon as you were in front of people, you were bringing it back together and you were holding it together. And I think those were your words. You're like, I was holding it together, and everybody thought that I was, being strong. And people even commented about how strong you are and, what strength it took to get through every single day. And they admired you. And that's one of the things that I, wanted to talk about today is, why do you feel that it's so difficult for women to just say, I'm done, stick a fork in me. I just need a bunch of people to come and help me because I can't do this by myself?
I think we are bred for independence. Mm-hmm. I think we are socialized into this mindset that we have to do it all and be it all.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, you know, I could look everywhere in my environment and find support for that, that I need to handle it. You know, people come and ask for support or advice, and I'm the one there to, you know, do it for them. It's time for us to go on a trip. Like, I take a lot of trips on vacations, kind of like my life. And having a portable kind of job, sometimes I take my job with me. But like, say we're going to go on a trip and somebody will call and we decide we're all going to go, and I'll be the one to organize it and make sure everybody pays and make sure. And so I think part of it is that we're socialized, part of it that people have that expectation, and then we tried our best to live up to it. And I think what you're reminding me of is that it was actually almost 2 years during that time after he had died, where I was pretty much a mess, but nobody knew it, right? It helped that I had that hour or so commute to and from work, because I had that amount of time to just be a snotty kind of hot mess. And then by the time I get to work, I'm all cleaned up and fixed, you know, and nobody knows.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like if they knew, then they would pity me, and that somehow that would diminish or reduce or make me smaller. I think that's what I really was believing. I also didn't want that whole reaction or response that people have when the same thing my husband was trying to say he didn't want, right?
Right.
I just didn't want that. And I remember at the funeral, I remember notifying people. I remember at the funeral and soon after, holding people's hands and giving them a lot of support,
Mm-hmm.
because they were having trouble managing his death. And I just was thinking that was going to be my whole life. So basically what I think happens for me, as well as other men too, is that we have these limiting beliefs, which in my language, we call them cognitive distortions.
Mm-hmm.
And they're basically lies that we tell ourselves about what's happening in the world that we begin to believe, which begin shaping our existence. And so the lie I was telling myself was that other people couldn't handle my grief. The lie I was telling people, telling myself, was that I had to put the mask on in order to be a good mom and to be a good sister. And nobody would, you know, and the lie I was telling myself was my emotions were too big and they would overwhelm me.
Wow, that's a huge revelation. But I really resonate with that. I really can understand. First of all, you were doing the same thing that your husband was. You didn't want anyone to say, "How are you feeling?"
Yes,
You know,
exactly.
which I find very, very interesting. But second of all, I don't know that I've ever looked at it that way, where I've actually said those words to myself. I don't think anybody can handle what I'm handling, but yet I know that I have thought that.
Mm-hmm. Right?
That's pretty that's pretty mind-blowing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Something else that you said when we talked earlier was how you, being a marriage and family therapist and having this background that you do, you had all the tools and technologies. So it's kind of like physician heal thyself, right? You wake up every day and you know the right words to say, you know the mindset you need to be in, you know. And so when you start to go down that rabbit hole, you say, no, this can't be. I know better than this. I'm not going to allow this. And it always comes up to giving ourselves permission. And I heard someone say the other day, I hate when someone says that, but when you think about it, that's what it is exactly, right? Because we make the choices of what we're going to accept in our life and what we're not going to accept. So when you give yourself permission to feel into what's going on in your life, I mean, really just sit down and do the ugly crying and the feeling and whatever it is that comes out for you, that is going to move you faster through whatever it is that you are experiencing than any other tool, technique, anything else that you can think about.
Yes. Yeah. And I do think that, you know, I had all the tools and I used them as weapons to mask it. Right?
Yes. Yeah, we're smart, aren't we?
Yes. You know, and it reminds me of little things like there's that one saying that always pops into my mind is the cobbler whose kids have no shoes, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Or they're all stitched together just good enough,
Right.
so
Right.
that they can continue walking. One of the things that was happening also for me was that it was eking out. It was seeping out in different ways that were, I would say, borderline offensive to other people. You know, and I didn't connect the dots quickly. I mean, my mother, my sisters, some of my friends connected the dots for me, and I was like, you know, I'm fine.
Yes.
And so I had this one scenario where we were going to my husband's funeral. And this is when I know, and the time lapse between when he died and the funeral was kind of, I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks, because life happened. And so we ended up doing more of a memorial for him, which was perfect. And my daughter's an infant, and I'm trying to get the car seat into the car. And we had rented a vehicle so we all could be in one, right? A big SUV. So I'm trying to get it into the car. It's the morning of the memorial. And I don't know how to do this whole latching system, right? I'm all frustrated. And in my mind, I'm thinking, if Charles was here, he would figure this out and take it, you know, and do it for me. My dad, my mother, my siblings, they're standing there waiting, watching me. And that was one, like when I look back, that was a huge turning point for me because I was so angry and frustrated. And, you know, of course, lots of emotions happening, right? And my parents and my family, they were paralyzed, right? Because they knew that if they said, Kim, let me help, I was going to do what?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I didn't have the kind of awareness or humility to stop and go, can somebody please help me? I felt like that was I just couldn't do it. I was like, I got to do this. I got to prove to them that they don't have to worry about me, that I got this. And I'm going to prove it starting with this car seat. And I look back on that moment and go, wow, that was huge opportunity for me to open up and just begin to say, you know what, I'm falling apart. But I just couldn't do it.
So I have a question. Did you run the car seat over with the car?
What did I do? You know, there's no. But I did want to
drop you an out here, girl. I'm giving you an out.
Look at me. I did want to drop kick it though. I was like, I think I could punt this about 20 yards.
You know, it's the same like when I was going through my divorce of 32 years, after 32 years of marriage. And I'm like, I've got this. I have all the tools. This is what I do for a living, right? I can do this. I can get through this. But you keep yourself so contained, and you're following this, I don't know, this rigid thought process. And I remember one day, my daughter said to me, Mom, I just really feel like you don't know what you want. And I remember thinking, you know,
yes.
But I did, you know, because when it's someone you love, you don't just sweep it under the rug, you know. I really felt like that was such a gift. And I won't say within 5 minutes I felt it was such a gift, but you know, as I thought about what she said, it really helped me to put it into perspective. And I stopped to think about, okay, so what I am putting out there is I'm all over the place. And, you know, inside I'm telling myself, I've got this. It's great. Life is wonderful. But what I am projecting is a hot mess.
Yes. And that's where I'm saying it was eking out, right? So I had a couple of friends, and many of my friends are therapists, right? And they're like, oh, you know, have you thought about talking to somebody about it? And I'm like, blah, 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 blah. And so then there was one particular situation where my mom said something like, oh, Kim, looks like Sydney's hungry, or something like innocuous. And I was like, wow, you know, she's not hungry. And of course, in my mind, I'm like, I'm such a bad mom. And everybody has to tell me when my daughter's hungry. And that's what's in my head. But exterior was like, wow, I got this. And she was like, you know, you might want to consider talking to somebody, you know, and so she was the kind of click turning point. And like you said, it didn't happen in 5 minutes.
Right.
It took who knows, another month or so before I was like, oh, you know what? It would be beneficial to talk to somebody about it. And um, that's when I think the healing really started.
Well, and I think it's important that we mention right here and right now is that, you and I are kind of sounding very glib about, how I went through the divorce and how you went through your experience. And we're talking, it may sound like we don't have any feelings about going through this, but here's the thing is, whatever the experience is, that becomes your story. And your story is full of emotions and feelings. So every time you tell the story, like you with your husband dying and leaving you with an infant, and, you lose your job or quit your job. And I mean, that is so chocked full of emotions and feelings. And it's the emotions and the feelings that we tend to not deal with, which
Yes.
is what I mentioned earlier when I said the fastest way to move through this, and I don't mean to make that sound lightly, but to move through that is to allow yourself or give yourself permission to feel the feelings and emotions that you're feeling instead of trying to be strong for yourself and others and those around you.
Yeah.
And so when we have this experience, which I'll call the story, and we share the story, oh my gosh, this happened. Oh my gosh, this happened. And each time we share it, those feelings and emotions come up for us again. And it's like they come up and we don't do anything with them. And they come up and we don't do anything with them. So when you're able to go beyond your story, meaning when you're able to release the feelings and emotions, work through them, release them, then that's when your story no longer holds you hostage. It no
Yes.
longer holds you captive to those feelings and emotions. And once you go beyond your story, then you're able to share the story without the feelings and emotions. And that's true, true healing.
Yes. And I think that's one of the permissions. Earlier, you talked about permission, right?
Right.
That's one of the permissions I got from Sharon, who was my coach at the time. And her specialty was working with grief and loss of someone who had cancer.
Mm.
And so she had a real specific specialty, and that's why I was really drawn to her. And one of the things is she helped me to give myself permission to tell people that I was grieving, and to tell people I still hurt, and to tell people I was sad or angry, and tell the story. I remember one time she challenged me to tell my story, which remember he had decided he didn't want to share the process. So I really hadn't talked about my experience
Right.
of my grief throughout the 10 years that he was suffering. And
Exactly.
so she encouraged me to go out and talk to and tell people in my world. And that meant I had to be vulnerable, which I struggled with. Um, that meant I had to be like snotty and, this thing I was doing in my car, actually do it with somebody who cared and loved
Mm.
and respected and would hold that space for me.
Right. And something that's coming up for me right now, too, that I feel really strongly about sharing is when my youngest daughter was 5, she was just getting ready to go into kindergarten. A very close family friend passed away, and we were very, very close to him. I mean, he was awesome. He was so amazing. And I grieved his loss and his death. It was just unreal. But I was also in the position of having to make all the funeral arrangements and, do all that work. So holding it together, like you talk about. Now my youngest daughter was very, very close to him, but we buried him the day that she started kindergarten. So as a mother, I thought, well, it's better for her not to miss kindergarten and, let her life be as normal as possible. And after a month or two, finally her teacher called me in one day and she said, something's going on with your daughter. And I just, thought maybe we should talk about it. And I just had no idea. And she said, as much as you've grieved the loss of this person in your life, you've not allowed her to grieve as well. Because, as parents, we think we're protecting our children. And
Yes.
they have thoughts and feelings and beliefs and emotions just like we do as adults. But in our love for them and wanting to shield them and protect them, we aren't teaching them to give themselves permission to go through those feelings and emotions. And I feel like that was something that I wanted to bring up right here, because it's not just adults that go through this.
Right, right. I think the scariest thing for us as parents and adults is not knowing how to help our children, manage the grieving process.
Right.
And in my particular case, I didn't really need to do that in the same way because she was pre-verbal. Mm-hmm. So we did it in a little different ways, and we still do now, where, she's able to, talk about him. I mean, it's as if she's known him because we've spent so many times talking about stories and memories, and we celebrate his birthday every year in our own way. And we also, I allow myself to let her know when I'm sad. Good. Because certain things, especially milestones in her life, cause me to feel excited, but also feel sad, right? Because I'm like, oh, he should be here to see this. He would be so proud and so excited. But I make myself share that with her so that she knows that it's okay to have feelings about it, because she's always had feelings about it.
And you're teaching her at a very young age that, tapping into these feelings and emotions is very, very healthy. And it's the most loving thing that you can do for yourself. I mean, there are many adults walking around that have no idea how important that is. So you're giving her such a gift.
Yes. Thank you. And that's my plan for her to not be afraid of those feelings. And when she was let me see, she was talking. Well, she talked. She's like me. She has a gift for gab. But she was maybe about 2 years old, 2.5. And she used to like wake up, like, right before she awoke, she was awake, I could hear her talking. Mom, blah, 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 blah. And I'd go in there and I'd be like, hey, who are you talking to? And she'd be like, I'm talking to Daddy. Aww. Oh, that used to just give me so many like chills. And it's so funny that I look back at that, because I was excited, because in whatever Daddy was for her. Mm-hmm. And I was also jealous. Yeah. Because I was like, oh, I don't have talks with him, like, in that level.
Right.
So that was interesting. But I also can think of different times when she would because I also wanted to arm her. Mm-hmm. Because she's started to go to preschool, I don't know, 3-4 years old. And everybody else in her mind was going to have this man in their life. Right. That she doesn't even have a concept of. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to arm her with the fact that you do have a dad. He just died. And so we talked about that pretty openly, so that when other kids would be like, where's your daddy? She'd be like, oh, my daddy, he died. And then I remember when you said that, the preschool teacher, because, it took a while before anybody asked her that. So the preschool teacher called and said, oh, stop when you come in to pick Sydney up, just stop by. And so I stopped by, and she was like, well, she's telling some of the kids the story that her dad died. And for whatever reason, people just assumed we were divorced. Oh. And so I was like, yeah. And they're like, well, and she was, you could see her just, and I was like, well, he did die. She was like that. She goes, so she's telling the truth. Like, that's a real story. I go, yeah, that's a real story. She goes, we've never had any children be so open about that. And I go, well,
yes. That's why there are so many adults walking around with, these limiting beliefs and not giving themselves permission to actually feel through trauma and events that take place in their life. And I love it that you're teaching Sydney at such a young age. She's so well equipped for this, about the whole spirituality of life. And there is no end of life, and her dad's always with her. And that's what a gift you're giving her.
Yeah.
I think you get Mom of the Year in my book.
Thanks. Man, I don't know. There was some of those years were so.
Oh, come on, girlfriend. That was your cue to go, thank you. I absolutely accept that, because
okay, let's do that again. Let me try. Let me practice.
All right. I'm gonna back up. And I go, whoa, I think you deserve Mom of the Year.
Whew, thank you. And you know what? I graciously accept it.
Oh, I am so happy because when a gift is given, it is always wonderful to have the receiver accept it with graciousness
Yes,
and
yes,
love.
yes, yes.
Yes, you're
Lots of love.
doing amazing things with her. And I feel, what I get from, just knowing you as long as I have that, we always think that, that we know what we're supposed to do in this life. Like, I'm here to
Yeah.
do X. And as our life unfolds and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and we start to realize, whoa, I went from this little pea to now this big watermelon, and now this big tree, and now this big planet. And you
Yes.
start to realize, oh, my mission was so much larger than what I thought it was. And if we don't give ourselves permission to expand with that, then we will keep ourselves small. And you are really teaching her to expand at such a young age. That's fabulous.
Yes, yes. Thank you. And
Yes.
and I see that in her, of course it turns into a little bit of precocious, right? Because there's a little extra maturity that she has that maybe her peers don't. But I think that that's, like you said, that's helping her to have some of those tools and the gifts in her vest that she could just pull out at any moment. And then also help her friends along.
Right, right. She will definitely be a leader, someone that people go to for that strength and that guidance, and, at such a young age. And I feel that whatever karmic journey she came here to travel, she'll be very well equipped for that.
Yes, yes. I agree. Yeah.
Well, I think that, gosh, this information is so eye-opening for parents and for parents who are parenting, and for men and women who are maybe still going through their story or still experiencing their story, and don't realize the power of going beyond your story.
Yes.
So I know that you said, when your friend approached you and your mom said something and then your friend said something, um, what would you say was the turning point when you knew that you'd gone beyond the story, that you're able to share it now without the feelings and emotions, and it's now a story of love and experience rather than negative feelings and emotions?
When did I know? Um, I knew that I was ready to go beyond the story when I was asked to be a co-author of a book.
Well, great.
And up until then, I still kind of kept it close to me. Like a few people, in my circle, my inner circle. But this author asked, and she wanted, and the book was called Mom, can you believe I can't remember right now? Mommy Divas.
Okay. Oh, I love
And
that title.
yeah. And the whole point of the book was to talk about mompreneurs, entrepreneurs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And some of the challenges or struggles that they faced and how they overcame them.
Mm-hmm.
And this colleague of mine called me and said, hey, I know this author. She's trying to get a group of people together. Would you be interested? And I was like, sure. And then she told me what the content was. I was like, ah. But it ends up that was, I think, one of the times in my life and the turning point that allowed me to be like, you know what, I can share the story. I'm not, I don't have all the feelings prickling like right at the surface.
Yes.
I still have, so the other thing was I felt if I healed, then I would no longer have access to those feelings. And that's not true. Another lie I was telling myself. And the other lie that I learned that I was telling myself was if I don't have the anger and the grief and the sadness, then I'm losing my connection to my husband.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not true either.
No.
The amount of connection doesn't have to be in the negativity.
Right.
And that was just and I know, my work with trauma victims and people who are trying to grieve the loss of X, Y, and Z. There's lots of places and areas to grieve. That's one of the things they hold on to the tightest, right? The sadness and the depression and the oppressive feelings and the anger. And I talked to them about the grief and loss cycle. And I said, you can just be connected in a different way.
Right.
I said, that's not the only way. I said, that's just one phase, and you can let go of that and know that you'll connect in a different way. And so through the process of my own healing, being a therapist, and then the process of writing my chapter in the book, I think that's when I definitely came to the other side, because now it's out in the public.
Yeah, there's nothing like putting it in print, right? And then publishing it to come out of the closet and say, okay, I'm an open book, literally.
Literally. And we did a book launch. And so the author happened to be in the East Coast. And so she was, we went to Maryland for the book launch. And I think there were 16 of us. And Mommy Diva's on the move. And she asked us each to stand up and talk about like why we decided to be part of the book, a little bit about our story and what we got from it, like our lesson, because everybody had to have some kind of a lesson at the end. And I remember standing up and I started off I got this. And I talked about the mask and how I had the mask. But then I also said, and then I, wrote the book, and she rejected my first, what do you call that? My first edition,
submission.
right?
Yeah, submission.
Yeah, she rejected it and was like, there's no feeling in this.
You were closed off, yes.
Right. And so I ended up having somebody help me, write it, whatever. And I was telling this process during the book launch, telling my process, etc. I said, and one of the things that I realized, she accepted it and it's going to be published. And I went, now everybody's going to know. Yeah. And that was like a really good experience for me, because everybody in the audience knew, everybody on the panel, and you know what? Nobody treated me differently. Mm-hmm. Nobody was like, oh, poor thing. All the lies, none of them came true.
Yeah. And what's interesting, we're so busy wondering like, oh, what is that person going to think about me? I'm telling you, they're not thinking anything about you. You know what they're thinking? They're thinking, oh, I wonder what that person's thinking about me.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. And we're not even giving ourselves the opportunity or giving ourselves permission to say, I am so freaking amazing. Look at me. I'm up here on stage. I wrote a chapter in this book. I told it all. I put it out there. I have moved through the feelings and emotions. And now I can share my story with passion and love rather than sorrow and grief and anger and frustration.
Yes.
Such a different way to share the story.
It is. It is. And I'm grateful that I'm able to share the story in that way. I'm proud of myself for having moved through the process. And I'm proud of myself for going outside of my comfort zone and asking for help. And then more importantly, accepting help as it's been offered.
That's fabulous. And I think we've just given every book publisher out there, a marketing ploy for someone who's thinking about writing the book. It's like, you'll feel better, get it out there.
Yes.
You have to get it out of you and onto the paper, and then let a bunch of people read it. And wow, that's really going to push you past your story, right?
Yes.
But in all honesty, I want to say, just for the sake of this, is however long it takes anyone to go through their story, to go beyond their story, there's no timetable. There's no judging of how long it takes. It takes as long as it takes. Never, never, never let someone tell you that you should be farther along or that you should be anywhere. I remember one time someone said to me when I was once again sharing a story that I had shared over and over and over, and it was, very painful for me. And I was sharing it with a friend. And so, you think that's safe space. And she turned to me and she goes, I think you need psychiatric help. Yeah. And I remember feeling so dismissed by that and so hurt because I wasn't there yet. So, if someone else feels that they have the right to step out and just make a judgment on you or towards you, and it really just hits you in a wrong way, give yourself permission to feel whatever that feels like for what that person says. And then if you need to remove yourself from that person's life, that's okay. That's okay, because maybe that was the universe's way of saying this person has done what they were meant to do in your life, and now it's time to go. The Buddhists have a saying called noble friends. And noble friends are those people that are in our life to teach us drama, strife, sadness, grief, anger. And once that person, you realize that those feelings and emotions are coming up and that person triggers that, you can say, oh, thank you very much. Now I bless you and let you go. And it's so much more just powerful to think of that person as a noble friend, right? That's better than saying that rat bastard, I'm so sick and tired of them.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. So when you say, oh yeah, that's a noble friend, that person was here to teach me something. And I humbly accept that lesson because, it's all about us. It's a 100% responsibility for everything that we're feeling, thinking, believing, choosing to do. And, we really want to get to a place where we take 100% responsibility for everything in our life and we stop blaming. And when we stop blaming, that too will help eliminate the negative feelings and emotions in our life, because then you start to realize how powerful you really are.
Yep, I agree. And there are plenty of people out there who are in their own hurt place, and they haven't done the work to begin to open up or to express or to begin healing. And so sometimes they project that onto you.
Right.
And so that's another reason to kind of be noble friend. Thank you. And just move on, because arguing or fighting against that is like, oh, that's futile.
Right. And it's no one's job to take on the journey of another person. Like you said earlier about, you felt that you had to be strong for everyone when your husband died. You were taking that role on, but it was never yours to take on.
Not at all.
You did that yourself. There was no written anything that said, hey, Kim, you've got to take this on because, you are a woman, you are strong, you need to do this. And, when you finally got to that realization and you said, that's not being strong, not at all. The strongest person is the one who could step back and say, I'm ready to accept the help.
Yeah. And
I feel like right then I wanted to say, drop the mic.
I know. I'm like, you heard me? I'm like, oh yeah, that's beautiful.
Except my grandson would say, Grandma, you're too old to say that, so don't say that. So I'll just pretend like I didn't say that if you're watching.
I absolutely love it. And I thought it was perfect.
Yes. But I mean, seriously, that is the most loving thing that you can do for yourself. And, Kim, if somebody wants to get a hold of you and talk to you, your area of coaching and expertise, I know that you do marriage and family therapy as well as life coaching. Could you take a few minutes and talk about the difference for someone who doesn't understand the difference between a therapist and a life coach?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. So the way in which we do work, or I do work, is as a therapist, I spend a lot of time going through what are you feeling? What are you thinking? I dig deep into how did this come about? What happened in your past? How is that informing your present and your future? What are some of the issues that you maybe have with parents, etc.? And I help walk you through it, the emotional as well as the actual activity and behaviors of it. And I go through this process, which we call TFCBT, trauma-informed cognitive behavioral therapy, right? Where we talk about the connection between thoughts, feelings, and beliefs, and lots of education around whatever the trauma is. So that's mental health, right? And there's a large component of that I help guide, support, encourage the expression of the feelings. When it comes to coaching, it's more of it still can be you had some kind of a trauma, but it's a lot more me helping you get through the behavior. It's a lot more, what are the next steps that you need to do to get to whatever your end goal is. It's a lot more goal focused, solution focused, and short term or brief. And we're not going to delve into your past in the same way. We're not going to necessarily try to dredge up all the emotions and look at them and figure out what are the ones that have been, you've been telling lies about. In coaching, it's a lot more specific, targeted, focused. And I love it. I like that they're similar but juxtapositions, right? Where one person can have a therapeutic experience with one of the therapists. And then after they kind of feel like they've made some progress, they can then go on to like maybe coaching, because now they realize what's holding them back, what's keeping them stuck. And now they're like, okay, now I have a goal. I want to, now ask for a raise, or now I want to look for another job or start a business. Like now they have like specific goals, and they need coaching on how to remove any barriers towards those goals. And so that is one of the differences. I think therapy has a lot of rules and regulations that I think could be applied to coaching. One of the challenges I think with coaching is that many people, there's no regulation. You could just, I'm a coach, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's no specific governing board. There's no specific legal ramifications if you become a coach. And so I think one of the challenges is that there is no specific coaching regulation that covers all types of coaching. And so I think that with that, coaches still deserve to have, I think there's a lot of credibility in coaching, because a lot of times it's also coming from your own experience, and you're just trying to walk somebody through the process.
Right.
So I think that making sure that people understand that therapy, yes, there's a whole big legal, ethical body, and then coaching, we're working on it. There are some the coaching federation that just have it, but right now, trust and believe that people are trying to help you walk through maybe their shoes, but in your own way. And so I think those are the two but similarities.
Well, I think it's really important to say right here too, someone who's trying to decide, is this the coach for me? If you decided on coaching versus therapy, go with your intuition. Your intuition will never, never lie to you. And if you feel uneasy about a person, then walk away.
Yep.
The thing is that where we get stuck is when we feel obligated. We'll have already had one session or something like that. And when we feel obligated, that's when we get ourselves into a situation that we don't want to have.
Right. Exactly. Mm-hmm. And in either situation, because I think they're very intimate and personal, that if I also want to always try to let any of my clients know that if you're feeling or not feeling connected, please don't hesitate to say something, because you could choose from thousands of millions of people, and maybe I'm just not the fit for you, and that's okay. And there's no hard feelings, because I want people to feel empowered to have choice.
Right.
Because who you choose is going to help you go in a certain direction.
Amen, sister. You got that right. So tell them how they can get a hold of you.
Oh, did I miss that part? So I think there's two ways to get a hold of me that are most efficient. And one would be through email. And my email is kim@fullerlifeconcepts.com. Mm-hmm. And Fuller Life Concepts is my website and the business. And so also you can get a hold of me through the website, fullerlifeconcepts.com.
And that's FULLER, fullerlifeconcepts.com.
Yeah.
Kim, it's been such a joy to have you here and have this conversation with you. I mean, you're so, you've gone beyond your story. And now when you share your story, there's so much love and passion and commitment there. And I'm just so proud to be in your tribe.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes.
Welcome.
Fantastic. So I really hope that the viewers that pay attention to this conversation, that watch this conversation, if you're going through something and you have a story that you share over and over and over, it's my hope really that something that we've said here will maybe just shine a light on where you are, so that you know that there is a next step. Because when you're feeling like there's no hope, that's when we get into trouble. There's always hope. There's always an opening. There's always a light at the end of the tunnel, even if it's just a pinprick. Just notice that light, find that little light, and start asking yourself, is it true? Is it possible? And if you can't get to true yet, just, is it possible that I could finally be able to share this story without the negative feelings and emotions and feel so empowered rather than disempowered. And I know that both Kim and I are here to tell you that's an absolute yes, right, Kim?
Yes. Yep, absolutely.
So think about your story, feel the feelings and emotions, and if you need someone to walk you through that, definitely, definitely reach out and find the person that feels the most connected to you. You'll know. Just give yourself permission to pay attention to your intuition. And if you like what you saw here, please subscribe to our channel, share it, let people know, because life is all about choices. This is about sharing empowering conversations that really do inspire, motivate, and empower you, the audience. In the meantime, this is Nancy Muller saying ciao for now.